Welcome to our talk about confinement and creativity. We're going to tell you a little bit of context around that topic, and then we'll show you a project we are just about to finish of confined art and design. So we are Arvid and Marie. This is Arvid and Marie. And we are designers, artists, and we work mostly with technology. I'm now showing you a few projects we've done with programming, with robots. But today we want to tell you about our experience and also wider experiences of art in confinement. So, Arvid, maybe you will tell us a little bit about a bigger context.
Yeah, exactly. Like this period of confinement has been, for us, and I think a lot of people around us, been a big moment of reflection. Suddenly losing this kind of freedom of movement that we hold so dearly has made us think, what actually is this freedom of movement? What do we do? What are the spaces that we live in? And
by that you mean the period of lockdown during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Exactly, yeah. And we were thinking about this after reflecting on ourselves, that there's a lot of people who actually have been confined in much more extreme ways than us. For example, as you see in the presentation, these are Russian prisoners who've had basically all of their freedom stripped of them. They cannot have their personal possessions, they cannot move around when they want, but still they feel a need to express themselves, and that results in this culture of tattoo art, which is highly illegal in the prisons. They have to smuggle in the needles, the ink, but somehow they manage to create some form of identity that spread even further than the prisons. And in that way, there's really this kind of creativity breeding from the confinement. It is like some kind of maybe essential drive of people to show themselves, which is also shown in the work of Leon van Es. He's a Dutch prisoner who has been making really strange, distorted spaces, but all from materials like toothpaste, the sand in the courtyard, only the things that you can actually get in prison, even though you're not allowed to have any personal possessions. On the other hand, there's also artists like Caye. I don't know if I pronounce his name right, but he's an artist who at some point locked himself up in his room for 1 full year. So he built this cage exactly like a prison. So there's a hard bed, there's a sink, and he made a contract with his roommate to give him food once a day and to make sure that he stays in there, to be also to be checking up on him, that he stays there and that he doesn't find creative ways to relieve his confinement or anything.
To be the jailers.
Yeah, to be the jailers. And in that way, teaching is also asking attention, of course, like why do we actually put people in prison? What does it do to people to lock them up? And how does it feel? Why do we do this? And this feeling of locking up is maybe actually, and especially breaking free of it, is kind of maybe a universal feeling. Think of artist Harry Houdini, who made his entire art about being locked up and then breaking free of it. Like, this is maybe such a essential feeling of freedom. Like, once you've been constrained so much, then to get out and then suddenly to be able to move around in freedom. On the other hand, there's also some other famous artists like Yayoi Kusama here on the presentation, but also Edvard Munch and Francisco Goya, who have been locked up basically for a big part of their lives, like usually because of mental health reasons, but they find certain ways in their confinement, in being locked up, in being isolated from the rest of the world, that they then express to the rest of the world, that somehow, the rest of the world is resonating with, that is making them very very popular in that way.
In the case of Yayoi Kusama, it was also her own choice to live in the institution.
Another side of this same story, actually, of being locked up in a space, is the art made by, again, Russian artists during the height of communism, when they were not allowed to express themselves in any way. So these are artists who are rebellious and they want to be critical of the system, but if they would do that outside, then they get locked up and sent away. So there was a whole culture of, they called it apart art, so art inside of their apartment. So they made exhibitions, they made their work in there, and there was a whole underground culture of visiting these artists' apartments in these social housing blocks, where they completely transformed their worlds around them.
This is a more recent project that is very interesting. Anglo Vermeulen is working together with groups of people, where together they design a spaceship. So it's not a spaceship for actually the purpose of going to space, but for experiencing what it is to be closed off in one space. How do they deal with food? How do they deal with sleeping, with the social contact with each other in such a small space? Yeah. So they fake a situation of isolation where then they close themselves up in to try to research these circumstances.
Yeah. So he brings a group of people together, has a workshop to think of what do we need when we live in isolation for 2 or 3 weeks. And then they gather the materials and make a space for that, and then they actually live in this space for 2 or 3 weeks and then reflect on what it is like and on the essentials of living. What do you need to live
comfortably?
Yeah, exactly. Talking about space, there's also been artists going into space, having artworks there. So this is Cosmic Dancer by Arthur Wood, who made an artwork that specifically interacts with this confined space of the Mir space station. So this object is rotating and interacting also with water and with the people in there, also to see like how does it change our perception of space while being in space. And here's 2 other artworks relating to the experience of outer space. The one on the left is by Alexei Leonov, actually the first person to do a spacewalk, who saw the sunrise over Earth. And he felt such a desire to express it that he made this quick sketch while being inside of the spacecraft at that point. And on the right you see something from the NASA art program by Joseph Christopher Chiconsos, in which he really shows like, what is this experience of being in such a small space for so long, always being constricted, moving in very different ways. And actually all of these things have been floating in our minds, and we've been wondering also like how to express it for ourselves, this kind of confinement and the things that make us that we have to think about. Right.
So what is then creativity during the COVID-19 confinement for us? Of course, there's been already a lot of things happening on that topic, because I think a lot of people have been wondering about their own practice in this environment. And together with an amazing group of people, Baptiste Labat, Jonas Ersland, Mikaela, Steby, Stenfalk, Mikaela, Steby, Stenfalk, and the group of Post-Neon, we've been working on exhibition, participative websites, so a digital exhibition that is called Confined.Work. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this. So how did it come to be? It was actually Baptiste first that talked about this, because he works a lot about designing in space, designing for space travel and space shuttles. So here you see a work that he did for adapting the human body to Mars. And he said, being confined in my own apartment in this period, it is for me already an experience of being confined in a space station or in a space shuttle. And so we started having this conversation together, and to, get our hands dirty a little bit, we started recording, documenting the spaces where we were all working. Some of us could still access their workshops, some of us were in their living room, in their kitchen, and we made these 360 images of where was it that we did the work. And here you see Mikaela's workspace. We also started to include ourselves in the works, like you see here, Vito from Post-Neon, being captured in their own 360 of their workspace. And then slowly we started also integrating the work we were just doing, our general practice, within those spaces. So what you see on the right is a fingerprints scan of a handrail in public space. And that's a work of Jonas Ersland. It's a research he is doing to collect fingerprints in the public space. And then he overlaid these fingerprints in his own domestic space, which I think is his kitchen that you see on the left picture. And so with all these panoramas and landscapes, we started making this collection of what was our perspective of this moment. But it also felt a little bit like there was a bit too small of a sample. So we opened the exhibition as an open call. So simply asking for whoever was interested in participating to also give us their 360 of where they work, include their work in it. And we try to keep it as open as possible and simply say, express your experience of this confinement during the pandemic through this image. And I'm going to show you a few things of the participations we've received that I find very interesting. So sometimes those participations really reflect how people worked in a very small environment. These are artists from Italy that ended up being with the Italian very strict lockdown, completely confined to just their apartment, which I understand is like one room. So they decided to build walls to separate one part that would be the workspace, which you see on the picture on top, and the other part, the picture at the bottom, that is their living, sleeping bed space. And so they built this wood construction and wrote even signs of how to travel within that space. Sometimes it's also been an interesting point of activism. This is the printing workshop of Peter van Ede, that has been spending confinement printing posters to advertise for world peace. And he thought there was also for him a way to advertise what he does, to then share his workspace and how he's doing it. And it's, for us, a very interesting experiment to do this because, of course, we work a lot with exhibitions, and often you get a space, sometimes such beautiful as the one we're here in right now, in Kaserne, and you get this space and you put an object in it. But with this experiment, we felt like most people could go a step further, so that also the space itself becomes the art or the design, and is completely transformed, like you can see in the image here. This is another example of that, that is the room of Baptiste. And for our own personal contribution, we also thought, oh, let's experiment with what is this medium of making a 360 image. And we also tried to, for example, what you see, make a 360 drawing, which was much more difficult than we thought at the start. And this drawing represents imagined survivalist basement that is based on my dad's basement. And then we also try to give different perspectives so that you could travel through this 360. Most of us actually quickly felt very restricted, very confined within only one image. So in this, you can click, for example, on one of the objects. So let's say the yellow router, and then you enter the object. And inside of the object are stories about, in the case of the router, about the internet and how things are connected.
Surveillance, knowledge,
surveillance, data. And it was interesting for us because this is something you cannot do in a physical exhibition, to get people to travel really through different perspectives of an object. So Confined.Work is going to open tomorrow at the time that you see this video. In the evening, and I highly encourage you to visit the website, Confined.Work.
There you can see all the artworks we saw before and more. You can go around there in 360, look around, move around.
There's also some sound. There's a lot of surprises we didn't show you today. And if you'd like to join our opening, we have made a whole program to continue this discussion especially focus on creativity and confinement. So we'll give first a tour. There will be 2 presentations from curators that have been already a long time working in the idea of art in social media, also what it means to make an exhibition more accessible. And finally, we will have a focused and structured discussion. It's a method that is called Equal Table. And for that, we encourage you to visit the Facebook event. We would like you to subscribe because it will be a small committee, structured discussion. So feel free to visit the website, feel free to see the work, or drop us something on the Facebook event. And we hope we have given a bit of context to this. There are many more beautiful exhibitions and artworks that have been made in this pandemic context. So let's keep an eye out.
We are Arvid Marie, and we presented Confined.Work
and Art in Confinement at Caye, thanks to A+T Society. Thank you for inviting us. That's great.